I've read and listened to a good deal of the opponent testimony from the officials of the Ohio Department of Health and various administrators of hospital systems. And the fundamental argument of theirs seems to be that they are the experts. They know what's best for us in regard to COVID because they are doctors or medical experts. And I think what they're overlooking is that this is not just a medical question. It's a question of what we value. In my testimony, the written, I encourage you to read if you have a chance, I try to stick to referencing doctors and scientists who are, so to speak, in the same camp as Dr. Vanderhoff, because they would presumably consider them credible. And the first one is Dr. Zubin Damania. And after talking about the science, he says this: you have all this science. The question is, what as a culture, as a people, politically do you decide to do with it? And that is a value judgment. That's why when people say, follow the science, you can follow the science, you can get that data, but that doesn't actually make the decision for you. Okay, now I know the data, what do I value? Do I value education, schools, economy, poverty, hunger? Do I value as many lives saved from COVID as I can? These are the questions you have to ask. What we're not making is the value judgment. There may be elderly people who value more their grandchildren, being able to have a normal life in school, not to have to wear a mask all day in school, that they want to be able to spend time with their grandchildren, and they are okay with accepting the risk to themselves in order to do that. When the playgrounds were shut down last spring, I'm sure there were many grandparents who really didn't care. They would have been quite happy with their grandchildren being able to play on the playgrounds. I know some people that stayed away from church for a few weeks last spring because of concern over the virus, and they came back because they valued Mass and Holy Communion. I remember when the governor announced last year the shutdown, and the media did not report that there was an exception for churches. That announcement came Sunday afternoon. I remember one mother and her children practically in tears because they thought they would not be able to go to Mass and Communion. In these value judgments, in making those judgments, the people of Ohio are the experts because it's our lives. We're not the medical experts, but when it comes to judging the value, we are the experts. It's our lives that are affected. And I'm not talking about putting a price on life. What we are weighing is the risk to life versus how much these mandates affect our lives. Whether a family wants their business to be destroyed simply to avoid a certain degree of risk, even if for some that might be significant. Unfortunately, for the past year, Ohio has been run as if it is a hospital. And we have had a huge, essentially a medical experiment on the people of Ohio, unwilling. The difference is that in a hospital, one of the fundamental principles of medical treatment is that patient consent, informed consent to the patient. The patient has an opportunity to accept or refuse treatment and to choose their doctor. Is that because the patient is a medical expert? No, it's because it's their life that's affected. Last year, everybody was sold on these restrictions by saying we just need to keep the hospitals from getting overwhelmed. You had a lot of compliance from people because they thought that was a reasonable goal. And somewhere after a month of that, somehow, with no explanation, the goal suddenly changed to we need to go for 0 cases, even after all the experts told us 0 cases is not possible. In my opinion, we did the elderly the greatest disservice ever by trying to repress something that could not be repressed and dragging out the point to where we reach population immunity. And that was all done to say, well, we're going to protect the elderly, and in the end, in the fall, we didn't. We had the same worst death count than Sweden by far. My opinion was, last spring, and it still is, that we should have protected the vulnerable, we should have helped them, but we should have also allowed natural herd immunity among the young. I think it was actually, people say it's selfish to go for herd immunity. I think it was selfish to not go for herd immunity among the young, because it only made it harder for the elderly. I know elderly that isolated for 2 months, hardly saw anyone, and it was all for nothing because over that course of 2 months, from March to May, we did not allow population immunity to develop, and they could not isolate longer. They came out, and some got sick. Myself, I caught COVID on purpose. Why? So that I could visit the elderly at home, bring them communion, and I would know there was no way I was going to get them sick. Because for me, I knew there was extremely small risk. It didn't make sense for me to be selfish and worry about me catching it. My goal was protect the vulnerable. So I pray that we'll put these limits on the emergency powers that I believe have been abused, and that we stop running Ohio like a hospital. We stop imagining that the House and Senate are medical boards. We're not here to make medical decisions. We're here to decide what we value. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.